All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistolka, and I'm excited for our guest today because I've got Michele Leavitt here today from Abrige Corp, and we are talking to the pivot catalyst herself. Welcome, Lori.
Good to be here.
Well, this is interesting because you've been the pivot catalyst a bit before we've heard this word as much as we did the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's been in the startup space for a long time. And actually it was the use of that term in the startups world that caused me to look at it and go, "Oh, this is where I fit," because in organizations that have more than one or two people, it's not quick. It is just pivots are not sustainable pivots are not quick. They are
Mm-hmm.
orchestrated, many people, many shifts over time. And so it just was nagging at me. So I was doing this for a while, and then I wrote a book on that same topic.
All right. So, and you said something, and we'll get back to this because I want to talk about the pivots, obviously. So, tell us a little bit about your background, so we can kind of understand how you've gotten where you are today, and being the pivot catalyst.
Okay, so I color my gray hair. So how far back do you want to go?
As
I've
far as
pivoted
you
a lot.
feel.
Well, we'll just start with the career. You had mentioned before we got on air about my financial background, and yes, I have all those letters after my name.
Yeah.
I was a financial analyst, internal to business. So some people call it management accountants, some people call it financial analyst. Basically, I was the person that was looked to for decision support. I
Mm-hmm.
put together all the budgets. I helped with strategy. I did all the variance analysis. I'm the one that said, this is the information that'll help them make the best decisions. And now, of course, I do that for myself and I do that for
Mm-hmm.
my clients. So that's,
Cool.
I was in corporate for about 17 years. I started my business in late 2000, and typical journey of, quote, an expert. I started as a consultant, and then almost immediately I saw a need for a software solution in the HIPAA space, healthcare privacy and security. So my first software helped many large and all sizes healthcare organizations move through this privacy and security regulations more quickly and and with better performance on the outset, not just compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that got me interested in, wow, I really truly can serve by creating software for the world. So now I wear all of those hats. I still do consulting, I do coaching, I have a software company. All of it
Mm-hmm.
catalyzes momentum for leaders and teams. Everything I do, the books, my speaking, everything is about catalyzing momentum.
Catalyzing momentum. I got
Mhm.
to write that down so we can talk about that in a moment. So, when you look at the the path you've taken, now it's okay. She started out as a financial analyst. You've had your own company, software company. This is not a typical path for people that are doing the coaching and like you're doing now. I would think that varied.
Well, I'll tell you one of hmm, I've been trying to think of when my eyes opened to why this was a fit. One, when you're really good at financial analysis inside of companies, you get
Mm-hmm.
to know people. Because how on earth can you help others make decisions if you're not getting the truth from people? And if you're not getting input, like before you have to go ask. So I was the person in accounting that would go out and walk around and talk to
Mm-hmm.
people and meet with all the different departments and divisions. So that was the start of it. I did a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And when I did that in the early days, so I knew that they're almost all acquisitions. So I'll just use that words. I knew that almost all acquisitions involved some issues with cultural fit.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just the due diligence. Okay, is this person hiding unpaid checks in their drawer? Yes, we did
Yeah.
check for that. But we
Yeah.
also, I also wanted to check the people. Well, I had to hide that early on in my days because my bosses just wanted to know that they just wanted my great financial models. They just wanted the financial expertise. They didn't really want to know about the people, which is, as we know today, ridiculous. And
Mm-hmm.
still, it's an area where many companies fall down. So all of this, becoming just like anything, um, it's not that I all of a sudden went, oh, well, now I want to be the pivot catalyst. It's just that I found the right words for what I do.
Okay. Oh, very good. And you're right. In acquisitions, the understanding the culture is sorely lacking in most people that are in investment buyers and across the board. And I don't think, hopefully, the larger transactions they're doing a lot more of it because it's significant when you look at something like that, putting two different cultures that clash together.
I'm seeing some learning out there. Absolutely. In my books, I write about Microsoft, and I think Satya Nadella is doing just some wonderful things. And it's not that the leaders before him were bad. I mean, we like to pick on Ballmer because he's so different to how
Mm-hmm.
Nadella is, but that seemed right for the time. It might have gone a little bit
Exactly.
beyond its time, but it was all about competition.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, during those times, there's also some of that know-it-alledness, if that's even a term, and that's when you miss those culture clashes. So that's I don't know if it was during his time or Gates' time when, say, the Avenue A acquisition happened and then it was written off. I mean, Nokia
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a culture thing, it was just a different reason that why it didn't work. But the
Yeah.
Avenue A, they didn't want to work at Microsoft, so it was written off. And this is in the 2000s. So it's taking us a lot of time, a long time to
Yeah.
really um, get. And with acquisitions, it's also difficult because so much is hush hush. You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
go into each organization and start assessing people
Yeah.
specifically.
Openly and
Oh,
and
that
letting
there's
everyone
going to
know.
be this acquisition. So I get it. I get that
Yeah.
it's difficult, but I will tell you there are ways to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. So you just finished the book, Pivot to Clarity.
Mhm.
It talks about, it says right on, just uh get clear for yourself and so you can be clear for others. um what really inspired you to write this latest book?
Well, two things. One is in the first book, I identify I identify a state that I see organizations are in when they are kicking on all cylinders, so as we say, that they really
Hmm.
are in the position to even have breakthrough performance. I mean, what they didn't even expect.
Yeah.
And it's a state that I call aligned momentum. And because I'm a financial person, this is where it shows up. You got to measure it. You don't get what you don't measure, right?
Hmm.
So, how on earth am I going to measure this? This is also one of the difficulties organizations have because the qualitative stuff is harder to measure. And so I wasn't going to write a book or even state that I'm looking for the state of aligned momentum without telling people what on earth does it look like? How do we know we're there? So
Hmm.
I talk about 6 aligned momentum key indicators. And the first one is clarity, getting clear for yourself and how you're being clear with others. So I knew I was going to write 6 more books,
Hmm.
and clarity also somewhat brought on because of the pandemic, somewhat because it's the first, just really felt like the right one to write today. I mean, we are if there's any time when our minds were muddy, it was
Hmm.
during the pandemic. I mean, I'll tell you, it was hard to write the book. It was hard for me to be clear about getting clear.
Yes. Well, and it's I think it's a natural starting point too, as you figure your the six
Hmm.
things you need to consider. Because if you don't have clarity in where you're going, where you know, roadmap, whatever you want to call it, or destination, anything like that, it's like taking off and going on vacation, but saying, I don't know where we're going. We're going to get in the car and go.
Yeah. Well, here's the tricky thing. So I don't know how tricky it is, but I find it's tricky for many leaders. Getting clear with you as a leader, and you're there to set direction. What I find is that so that level of getting clear is more of a it's less you know exactly how to get there. And most I find, and we all want to do this. We want to know. So mostly we walk into those strategic planning sessions and we jump directly to year one. And doing year 5, 3, whatever is just an exercise. It's not even no one's really thinking outside of the box, letting themselves go, letting them think about this or even talk about something that's really far in the distance that's fuzzy, but that could create that magnetic pull. That is what inspires everyone. So what happens is they go into the strategic planning session, come up with their 1-year strategic plan,
Mm-hmm.
create a budget from it, give the budget to people, and somehow think that that's inspiring. And I'll tell you, I've created a lot of budgets and I'm pretty good at it, but none of them are inspiring.
Mm-hmm. You make great points there because that is you've described the annual budgeting process for most companies, and the 1 year. You're right. It says this is what we're going to do this year, but it doesn't lay out something that's transformational. That's really, you know, a true goal for the company to aspire to, or whatever you want to say. It usually is within the confines of what we know now. This is where we're going to go, how we're going to perform. Unlike a 3 or 5 year, even 10 year, where you can really lay out some of those broader goals that can really change your industry or your the lives of everyone that's associated with your business.
Right. And that's what I do with the software that I have today, which is a different software, which is really working on that. I'll call it a leadership operating system, really working
Mm-hmm.
on that issue. Because the other thing that happens, even those that do take some time to think through at least say a 3-year plan, and I say at least because yes, I know you can't execute that. Today is moving too fast. You're going to execute year 1. All I'm saying is when I say get clear, I mean go ahead and go to that. Where are you going towards? But
Mm-hmm.
just don't come up with the details. And what happens is then there's so many things that no one can measure. And so that's what I try to support with this. How do you measure that qualitative stuff so that you don't just have the strategic plan that goes on a shelf or in an online folder these days, and a
Mm-hmm.
budget that looks like maybe a fourth of the strategic plan because
Mm-hmm.
it can measure sales and it can measure headcount, and there's just
Yeah.
not a lot else there.
Yeah.
And helps them really really look at it in a more holistic way.
Huh. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because you really did capture in a nutshell the difference between when you go beyond the first year of budgeting, or you look out into the long term of trying to see where your company's going. It's not really, there's some numbers, but it's really more of, we're going to go in this direction because we think it's the biggest growth. And then yes, it's some estimate of numbers, but those numbers aren't even going to become close to materializing. The other parts of moving towards those industries or segments or opportunities is what you really need to be moving, and that's a lot more qualitative than quantitative.
Right. You do enough so that you know what steps you have to take. You do
Mhm.
enough so that you know, hey, if we want to do this, we need these kind of people. I don't think let's assess to see if we have them right now. Maybe we don't. Or we need to be more visible in this area, or whatever fits your business, so that you
Mhm.
have, you look out that far so that you can think of these key steps, these milestones, these more about how you will be than what you will do as an organization.
Mhm. I'm thinking as you're saying that because and thinking of the leaders that you're helping do this. This is a crucial step for them to really um, think in multi-year terms, because there's a lot of organizations that you can't. I mean, it multi-year work, right? It's if you want to go into um, just whatever you want to go into a different industry, you want to branch into a different market, or even just going from I only sell in the United States and now I sell globally. It could be a multi-year process, and you're absolutely right. It's like, what kind of foundational things do I need to do today to be able to step on that, uh, build on that foundation tomorrow to go to the next step to finally get to that
Mm-hmm.
over a multi-year time frame. Huh. Very cool. So as you're writing this book, what were some of the things that you discovered that you said, this helped me a little bit with some clarity?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned where it helped me with clarity. Well, one is anytime I write a book, I get better at being clear. Still, I do talks like I'm doing with you. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the host will ask a question, and then I listen back to the tape and I realize I didn't answer that question until way after I went into some stories because something else was on my mind. And so when I'm writing a book, I have to force myself to, who am I talking to and how would I explain this? How would I express this to them? And how do I want them to feel when I do it? And bringing that back from that authoring process to real life is a continuous learning process. I mean, I'm not perfect at it. What's one of my mentors, David Meltzer, says, wonderfully imperfect. So I'm wonderfully imperfect today and probably tomorrow.
There you go. That's awesome. And it's funny you say that, because I interviewed Steve Human a few weeks ago, and he's the science fiction author, and he
Hmm.
said a very similar thing about when you write, you have to think about how you want to make those people feel in your writing. And yeah, huh. That's
So in
very.
this one, the first book, not that it doesn't have any heart, but the first book is much more what you would expect of a business book. They're
Mm-hmm.
both very well researched. But the second one for me was harder. I mentioned how so I was the expert and I had to unlearn a lot to be this person that's um, more of a coach. And it is more in living in curiosity and being
Mm-hmm.
interested than being interesting and living in I'm the solutions person. And so my first book, which is a fantastic book, it walks through, why you want to do this, orchestrating pivots and getting to align
Mm-hmm.
momentum, and really how stepping from here. If you're here, then you go here. And if you're here, then you go here. With Pivot to Clarity, I really wanted I want readers to feel a certain way. I mean, no one chooses to change unless they feel inspired. Some words they read or hear causes something to click.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to get that from instructional materials. That's why so much training doesn't work. It's like
Mm-hmm.
people need to get that information in a certain way and at a certain time in order to choose to try something new, choose to be vulnerable and look stupid for a while in order to change. Choose to start asking questions anytime they're getting ready to give a solution. Choose to be the person who pushes through whatever is tough. I call it tenacity. Will push through resistance and knows as a leader that other people are going to feel that resistance and that they have what it takes to help others move through it.
Mm-hmm.
And getting someone to feel that way about themselves if they're not there yet is, it's something I'm working on doing. And I started with this second book.
All right. Yeah. So you mentioned this is something that I often wondered, and I see it happening in business. It seems like we talk about pivots in the sense of the last couple of years and as those kind of things, but we talk about business change over time. And you've talked about pivoting and really what businesses need to do over time. Why is it, do you think, that it is so hard? It is so hard, even when it is right in front of someone's face in these businesses, for leaders to take a hold of the fact that they need to make a change and then actually follow through and get the changes made. It just seems like so many businesses just die because they cannot make a pivot. And even when it's so evident, right? It's so evident that they will die if they don't do it, but they can't do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm laughing because there's so many different components of the answer for that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I know.
I also don't want to say I have the answer
No,
because
no.
then I would be the know-it-all. But here are my thoughts on that topic. One, we need to let go and not have to know. We do not always have to be the expert. If we have to know, we've automatically created resistance for ourselves and probably everyone else around us so that they're not going to step up and help.
Mm-hmm.
Another is that you really need to have a purpose for why you're doing what you do. When I say look into the future, I'm also saying it's a North Star. That's why I said it's a magnetic pull. It's that purpose. I go through really tough stuff, but that purpose, knowing that I have a reason for going through it, that worthy goal, that purpose I have, pulls me through those tough times.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have it, when you're just solving one problem after another and one looks too difficult, you're just going to let it go because there's no reason to push through. Now, there are some times that if it's really hard, you should say no. And I had to work on that because I was a never giver upper. And
Yeah.
sometimes if you look into the future, you'll see that you can keep pushing and trying, and maybe you're feeling pulled by a purpose, but let's say it has no economic engine at the end. I mean, you find some facts change, like you think it did, but then you realize maybe you're heading into a new market and someone gets
Mm-hmm.
there first. That's a simple answer to that. But then
Mm-hmm.
maybe you do change your mind, right? Maybe you don't keep going. But that's a conscious choice. That's all right, the facts have changed, so now I'm going to change this destination I'm going to. But if you don't look far enough out, you're just solving one thing at a time. Resistance will slap you down every
Mm-hmm.
time it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. The word ego comes back into my mind. Do you think the leaders, their ego just hits them as they don't know, that their ego won't allow them to appear to others like, we don't know how we're going to go there, but we need to go here. And since they can't say that holds them back from even doing anything.
Well, ego is just that we're human. And I think
Yes.
you're talking about that their belief system makes them feel like they need to know it all.
Yeah.
And
The-
that is a block. Absolutely. That is a
yeah.
hindrance. And I talk about that a lot in my book too. And someone read it and they went, man, you talk about know-it-alls a lot. And I think in part is because I was one. I mean, it is a challenge for many of us achievers because people look to us to know. And it's not, so it's
Mhm.
not always coming from a place of, well, I don't think I was ever arrogant. It's not coming from a place of arrogance. It's coming a place from we're defined by it, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Oh, it
So
does.
one thing I'll say is that it's not your fault, it's your default. You've been
Mhm.
doing it that way for so many years. So one of the chapters, I devote an entire chapter to the book and Pivot to Clarity on hope and fear. And I actually include that in the part on being clear, on how you can be clear with others, because you need to understand fears in order for your message to land. If you're just spewing out your words and you're in the wrong place, wrong time, wrong set of people, your words are causing defenses to raise up. You're
Mhm.
starting with story instead of the point when you're in business. Their fears are going to be coming to the surface. But the first thing to understand are your own fears. What are those things? Are you afraid to be vulnerable? Are you afraid to look stupid?
Hmm. Yeah. Because you see that holding people back every day. Anybody, and I don't think anyone, as you said, is immune to it. That's for sure. And even though we know everybody's afraid, we all are human, and we need to be able to share that appropriately and move forward. I just, um, yeah.
But it's really hard to understand they're blind. Many times they're blind spots. They're blind spots if we're doing something and we don't know we are. For
Yeah.
example, it's possible that when I was showing up, and I'm sure I was as a know-it-all, that I felt that I was helping the person by being that they needed that from me. And so that would have been a blind spot. So one of the reasons I started leadership peer groups was because I hadn't had people to identify my blind spots. Now, that wasn't the one that was the hardest on me. The hardest on me was that I was this expert in decision support, and yet I failed in making decisions about executive level people when I started my business.
Mm-hmm.
And I had millions flow out to them, unfortunately. And huge lesson. And I had to, on my own, figure out that I was the theme in this story and what on earth was I doing,
Mm-hmm.
or who was I attracting or who was I allowing to be in that circle. And I had to switch up that circle. But it would have been so much easier if I'd had a peer group around me that could have helped me identify those blind spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that if there is one thing I see that has really, to me anyway, changed a lot in the last few years anyway, in the last 5 or so, is the rise of the mastermind or peer groups where you truly do have more people working together that can help each other from a peer level like that. And you've done a lot of that, the peer group coaching.
Mhm.
What are some of the things, and you brought it up, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions. What are some of the things that you really see when you get these good peer groups going? What are some of the benefits that these executives see?
Oh my word. I mean, one of the reasons I still do it is it's so rewarding to see the transformations. And it's not me, I just create the space
Mm-hmm.
for it. And as a good facilitator, you recognize when a conversation is going a certain way or when people are really needing to ask a question or something like that. Um, so I've seen businesses go from hugely in debt to multi-million-dollar businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And the leader just feeling so relieved and, this huge burden. And he did it, himself. He did. I mean, we didn't do it for him.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen marriages improve. I mean, go figure. That's, I'm not a life coach. That's not me.
Yeah.
I have seen people just understanding their business better. For example, if they're not seeing financials timely, and I might say, you need to see the financials timely, yet you know your business better than anyone. What would you measure? Like if they're in construction, what does it mean if you have pipe on the job site a month before you need to place it? What does that mean to your business?
Mm-hmm.
There are things that they know and no one's ever just called it out. I've had people, many of them have finally fired someone who was toxic. They were afraid to do it before then. And because they're all good people, right? And they're
Yes.
always thinking, we need them. Other people like them. Did we fail them? Did we not train them enough? And no, they're just toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of them.
Yeah.
Knowing that they had done, everything that they could, and the person just didn't choose to change. So I've seen wonderful things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those toxic people, man, you just can't get rid of them. Can't get away from them, can you? It's, I mean, I think in almost any organization, there's a level of that, and it's how much of it will the leaders choose to accept, and two, how much behavior do they display? Obviously, sets the groundwork for a lot of it, but yeah. So what do you enjoy the most about peer group coaching?
Well, the transformations. I mean,
Just the
absolutely. The fact that so again, as a consultant, whether I was inside the business or outside of the business, I will give the advice and the guidance, and they'll end up taking it. It'll sustain or not. But when you're working with these peer groups in a coaching fashion, and they're working with each other, when they become better leaders themselves, because they learn this method of questioning, and to see people choosing to change, it's going to stick because they've chosen to.
That is very cool, because you get to see them when they make that choice to change, and then start doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those that I work with, everyone that I bring into the group is very selective. They have courage, curiosity, and tenacity. It's not like I'm bringing know-it-alls into the group and now they're not being a know-it-all. So I never know what the transformation is going to be. But I've seen one in almost every person that has been through my groups.
Very cool. I've always wondered about this. How hard is it to put the right people in the group together?
Very hard.
I was always thought about that would be the hardest thing to do, is like,
especially in a small community. So I'm starting global remote groups.
Yeah.
And I love seeing people face to face. So there'll be adventures involved where everybody can get together, because I just love that idea. But it's easier to feel safe when you don't live in the same community with everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd imagine.
Otherwise, you could put together a group and it just wouldn't be transformational. It would be what many masterminds are, which are tips and tricks. You don't have, it's not so hard to fill a group for tips and tricks. It's just not what I choose to do.
Yeah. Yep. Describe in your words what transformational means.
So one, the term's choosing to change. So transformational is something where you have become different in a way that you wouldn't have even have thought of when you started.
Very cool. Yeah, because I wanted to hear it from you, I understood, and everyone else listening understood, because I think that's when you see those kind of things happen, and you really see that 1+1 = 3 or 4 or 5. It's a special thing,
Mhm.
and yeah, awesome. So this is one of 6 that you're going to be writing. So the one of 7. Oh, it went on mute again. Sorry. Or something came out. It's showing that you're on mute from here. Not hearing it. I'm trying to unmute it. It says the mic is not connected. There we go. Now I got it. I got you again. There we go.
Weird.
Yeah, it was weird.
Strange. Oh, I was just avoiding your question. No.
There you go. That's cool.
Excuse me.
So how many more books? So it's not 5.
No,
It's
so
not.
the
How
pivot
many more are you gonna-
orchestrating extraordinary momentum was the first book, and
Mhm.
it identifies 6 aligned momentum key indicators.
Mhm.
And so there are 6 smaller, I call them airplane reads, on each of those indicators. So there's a total of 7,
All right.
and there's a total of 5 out now. I mean, there's a
So
total of 2 out now. Excuse me. There's 5 remaining. I can
5
count.
remaining.
There's my financial prowess.
Yeah, well, I went to school for engineering, and you're supposed to be good at math when you go to school for engineering, but it's not really that way. In some cases. So do you have a schedule that you're going to release these? Are you planning on doing them every year, every couple
I'm
years?
planning on a year and a half for each.
Okay.
If I could do one in a year, that would be great. I don't know how people do them faster. I think they have teams that are doing the writing or something. I have no idea. Or they're completely prescriptive,
Mm-hmm.
instructional. These books just don't come out. The next one I'm doing is on talent adaptability. It's actually the 5th aligned momentum key indicator, but I think it is the next one that's most needed in our world today. And it requires interviews. So I'll just shout that out because I am starting to interview academics that are in this space. I am interviewing CEOs, futurists, those
Okay.
that are strategic in human resources, that have some input on talent adaptability. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. Well, wow. That's a
All my
big.
books are in 3 sections, and this one, so on Pivot to Clarity, the 3 sections are first getting clear for you. The next section, part 2, is on how you're being clear, communicating with others. And then the last part is more of, if you're here, then go here. But in Pivot to Clarity, it's more about asking questions. So I provide questions that they could ask that's helping to for everyone to get more.
Oh, it muted again. I'm sorry.
It's
Oh, there
doing
you
it
go.
on its own.
Yeah. Well, we'll get around it.
And so this one, the first section is going to be on how do we as leaders actually have some idea of how talent is to adapt for the future. How do we know? And then the next part will be on, if once we have an idea, how on earth are we going to motivate inspire for the changes in others. It is,
Yes.
it is not, certainly being in a state of aligned momentum will help, but this is not the pandemic. I mean, you mentioned that at the beginning. Everybody pivoted quickly, but it is not sustainable. They are overwhelmed. The
Mm-hmm.
cultural changes needed for aligned momentum were not set.
Mm-hmm.
And so going to people now and saying, "Well, just adapt," and they're going to say, "Why?
Yeah.
You don't have well, there's a pandemic." No, well, yeah, they still have one, but it's just not the same urgency.
Yeah. Well, and I sit here and think about it is so key too to be able to hire people that have adaptability. That
Yes.
the people are able to adapt to the different changing situations, because it is another thing that's killed so many businesses. They don't adapt, and it starts with the leaders you talked about before, but identifying people that have the traits that will really allow them to be more adaptive than others is such a gift if you can do it.
Right. And it's more than just skills. For example, so my development team is mostly in India. And
Hmm.
India has a huge political uprisings right now, and they keep shutting off the internet and sometimes even shutting off power. Well, that's
Wow.
that's not good for business.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
I know, not only do I know that the person has the skills, those skills aren't helping me right now during this, but I know that whenever he has the chance, it doesn't matter what hour of the day it is, if it comes back on, he's on and finding out what help we need.
Yeah.
That's a values thing. That is what helps me make the choice. Well, why would I get rid of him during this temporary time
Hmm.
to find someone new if I have this person who is gonna be there whenever he can,
Hmm.
and he just can't right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great example. It's a great example because as leaders, if you can identify the people that are going to be able to be like that, it's in these. And let's just be honest. If I think anyway, I want to hear your opinion. If leaders aren't adapting to the fact that they should constantly be in a state of pivoting ever so slightly, but continuously. In the old days, we called it continuous improvement, but that was around process and things. And I'm talking around business. Um, I just don't think that they're ever going to be able to really keep up because there's
I
so many things happening
completely
so fast.
agree, and I will add that it includes them.
Oh
It's
yes,
not just about everybody else.
yeah, yes. Well, I I posted about this yesterday on LinkedIn. I said,
Did you?
what most people don't realize is the changes outside of us, and especially at leaders, to start within us. And if it doesn't start within you, it's never going to get outside. And it doesn't matter if it's you with one person or if you with 1,000 people.
Mhm.
It's got to start inside. And if you're ready to do it, you got to do it and make those changes. And because yeah, it's not just on the outside, but this is the thing that we see. And we talked about a while ago. Businesses won't make the change, leaders won't make the change, and businesses will die. And coming out of this, there's a whole subset of businesses that don't want to face the reality that our ecosphere, and again, this is just my opinion, has changed forever, or at least for the foreseeable future, in the fact that a lot of business went digital that won't come back to in person.
Mhm.
And people changed the way that they had to do business, but they found some things they liked about it. Remote work is an example. Um, it's some people think, well, we're all going back to the office. I don't know. There's some that should and need to, but is everyone? I don't think that's going to be acceptable for everyone to do that anymore. And
Yep.
the people that think that it's going to go back and we're going to be, I just think that they're going to fall the wayside in this continual evolution of change. Yeah, we had a sidetrack here, but it's always been there. And I think it just got accelerated, and your the book on Pivot to Clarity, getting people clear on the fact that they need to be ready for this, and they need to be clear where they're going and why they're going there, I think is so helpful. So
Thanks. Yep. Yeah, we just had a talk about this remote work in our group the other day, and it is a challenge. And I just loved the leader who was expressing her angst with people not wanting to come back in because she'd let them be out. Not let them, but that's just, and they didn't want to require people to come back in. They wanted to have people to choose to come back in. But she's bringing interns into her business, and the interns have no middle management. It's like an intern and top management. The middle management all wants to stay remote. And so the people that are coming into the office don't have the experience they would need. And so, of course, the leader sees a challenge with labor in the future. And so, what do you do? And I appreciated one of the things she said. She said, do I need to change my view on this? And we talked about words, because one of the reasons many leaders say they want people back in the office is collaboration. And I love the word collaboration. Do not get me wrong. I'm just saying that it is, if you have a word that's a hot word where people are saying, wait, we're just as collaborative when we're not in the office, then you got to rethink the word. You either have to, it's similar to a value. I had one member who they hadn't defined what respect meant, and someone toxic in their workplace said, well, I'm being respectful. They're like, and finally they just said, well, that's not what respect means here. It's like, that's what they had to resort to. But you gotta define what you mean by that, because it's so easy for people to say, well, yeah, we're just as collaborative. And so she used the word connection. I said, well, what about that word? Use that one. And why? And know why. Why is connection important to that organization? And why isn't connection important to them? Why would they want connection? And I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying we really, as leaders, we need to think. That's part about being clear, to getting your message across and it helps you get clear when you're being clearer.
Yes.
Is to think about the words you're using. And if you're hitting a wall, think about using different words.
Yes. No, I think I love it. And that's why I brought it up, because I think that it really, you're talking about the need to get in this continual pivot, but not like 90 degrees, to keep things moving. So everybody's used to the pivot, comfortable with the pivot, and just keeps going. But yeah, the remote work thing, I think that's a multi-year conversation. And the only thing I've seen from it is that people need to be more intentional about the way they lead in a remote setting. And you don't have that, like you said, the middle management may not have as much interaction with an intern or a new person if it's not intentional. And because I've seen, well, my son, he works remote, and I've seen how they were very, very intentional about how they did it, and it turned out pretty well. But that's for another day. But Lori, I want to thank you. I am so happy we got the chance to talk, because your book, Pivot to Clarity, good stuff. Can't wait for the other ones to come out, because I think, wow, they're going to be good. They're going to be good. Any final thoughts for people that are listening?
No. I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Yeah, good. Well, we didn't get any questions today. We had Thesia said, hey, she liked your definition. We were talking earlier about transformational. And then Mike is just a guy I know. He's coming in saying hello. So that's what we got today. But thanks so much for being here. Where can they find your book? You can find it on Amazon. I know I've seen the other places you get it.
I put up a landing page for Pivot to Clarity so that I could offer a few videos and some other things if people wanted to get the book, and then
Okay.
come back and give me their name. And that's just pivottoclarity.com.
Very good. Very good. So they can go to Pivot to Clarity. They can also connect with Lori Michele Leavitt on
Yes.
LinkedIn.
And my website, they can go to thepivotcatalyst.com.
All right. Very good. Well, we'll have those in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Lori, for being here. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Hold on just a second, Lori, and we'll talk after we get off the air.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.